And there are some major developments to tell you about in the Winter Olympic talks between North and South Korea. Both sides are meeting today. This is the second time in a week as they're trying to hammer out the details for the North to take part in next month's games that are occurring in South Korea. And we're told for the first time ever they have agreed in principle to field a unified Olympic team. Senior foreign affairs correspondent Greg Palcott now live in London. So, Greg, what exactly was discussed in those talks today?
Well, Eric, there was more Olympic diplomacy on the Korean peninsula today. This time, the South Korean delegation of officials crossed over the military demarcation line there at Panmunjom, DMZ, where we were last week, and met with North Korean officials. This about North Korea's participation in next month's Winter Olympics in South Korea. Along with both South and North Korean sides appearing under the same banner, there's also discussion of fielding at least one actual combined team. That would be women's ice hockey. Also, the North Korean artistic contribution to the games discussed. North Korea agreeing to send a big orchestra. Also, there have been reports that they're going to be sending their official girl group to the games. But, Eric, to show you how tricky even that is, there's controversy over this group. It's supposed to be Kim Jong-un's favorite.
Okay. We'll see if that indeed happens. Meanwhile, there's some backlash towards South Korean President Moon. I mean, he praised President Trump and some of his views. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, again, Eric, we were there last week. We heard these words from President Moon, very strong, saying that President Trump helped facilitate these breakthrough talks. Well, over the weekend, North Korean state media blasting that, saying that's absolutely not to be believed by the regime of North Korea. Regime of Kim Jong-un even threatening not to go to the Olympics after also what they called rash remarks by the South. The remarks, well, they want the nukes removed from North Korea. Also, one more word from North Korea, Eric, provocative. That's what the regime is calling some movement of some elements of the U.S. military, the B-2 stealth bombers, which are nuclear ready. There's a deployment of 3 of those to the Guam air base, as well as the movement of an aircraft carrier and an amphibious vessel. It's really not completed here until we get everything locked in, but it's expected that North Korea will go through with their participation with the games.
That'll be something. We'll see if indeed it leads to any other type of breakthrough. Greg Palcott in London, thank you. Sandra?
All right, Eric, thank you. Meanwhile, President Trump is firing back at the Wall Street Journal, saying he was misquoted in an article about his relationship with North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un. The paper quoting the president saying, "I probably have a very good relationship with Kim Jong-un of North Korea. I have relationships with people. I think you people are surprised." Mr. Trump saying he actually said "I'd" with an apostrophe, as in I would. The White House releasing its own audio recording of the interview over the weekend, prompting the Journal to also put out its audio. Here are both versions. Listen.
I have a great relationship with Prime Minister Abe, Japan. And I probably have a very good relationship with Kim Jong-un of North Korea. As you know, I have a great relationship with Prime Minister Abe, Japan. And I probably have a very good relationship with Kim Jong-un of North Korea.
James Freeman, assistant editor for the Wall Street Journal's editorial page, joins us this morning. So the president says he was misquoted. The Wall Street Journal stands by its reporting. Right. Where does that leave us this morning?
Yeah, I think I should say I'm on the opinion pages. I don't speak for the reporters on the news side. I think they got it right as I listened to it. I understand from his perspective, if you hear the context, maybe you can see it the other way. But I think the most interesting part of that interview is when the Journal reporters asked him, "Have you spoken to Kim Jong-un?" He didn't want to answer that. Now,
but to be fair, that's been his strategy all along, right, though, James? I mean, he does not want to broadcast his strategy.
Okay.
He doesn't want to publicly say how he's, but still, you say the biggest news is him not saying, "No, I haven't spoken with the dictator."
Yeah, I'm not sure. Obviously, that would be big news if he had. And this is really the question. You get to what is the art of the deal here? He started out publicly with a very hard line. The South Korean president has obviously wanted to take a softer line, and I think the president, our president, is trying to manage that. But on the other hand, you have seen the North Koreans maybe showing a little more willingness to talk.
To be fair, the president, nobody was really making a big deal out of this apostrophe or lack thereof or inclusion of until the president really pointed out and said, I did not say that. I mean, why is it coming down to this, do you believe?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I guess I would say if you're looking for fake news targets, this is probably not one. I would say looking across the media landscape, I mean, there are other networks, for example, that spend a lot of time with non-doctors issuing diagnoses on his mental health or calling him a liar. This one, as I said, I think our reporters got it right. But I don't know why he's chosen this moment to talk about it. It is obviously with the Olympics coming up. This is a key moment in terms of his relationship with South Korea and how he's going to somehow get that nuclear and missile issue with North Korea addressed. And the frustration is he's had the South Koreans negotiating. The North is saying we're not going to talk about getting rid of our missiles and our nukes.
They're giving him credit for the talks,
right? They're giving him credit for the talks, but they've opened up some daylight here, and I think that's what's made it difficult. Is it seems like the South Korean president is a lover, not a fighter, and that's fine. No one wants a war there, but it does make the negotiation challenging for a president.
Well,
I think
it was indeed a wide-ranging interview in your publication, The Wall Street Journal, and they titled it "Donald Trump Signals Openness to North Korea Diplomacy" in this interview, citing a positive relationship with the nation's leader. I mean, is that all fair game still? Is the president open to diplomacy and open to speaking with the leader?
Yeah, I think this is the question, is how much of this, because he's obviously changed his tone a lot. We've gone from Rocket Man and talking about how big the U.S. button is versus the one Kim Jong-un has. So this is new, and I think a lot of it is driven by the reality that he can't take that hard a line if the South Koreans don't want to take a hard line. But, we'll see. Maybe this actually does lead to a positive outcome.
And, of course, this is the second time that the North and the South will be meeting in a week. You just wonder if this is going to lead to a diplomatic solution after all.
I guess I wouldn't. One thing the South Korean president has said is basically don't be too optimistic that we're going to solve persuade North Korea to get rid of its nukes, its missiles. This has obviously been a challenge for presidents going back more than a quarter century. They've all failed prior to Mr. Trump. He obviously has a different approach in terms of communicating, so maybe we ought to have an open mind about whether he can get a deal done.
All right. Well, we will see what happens. But again, you go back to the history the president has with North Korea. He does not want to broadcast his strategy there. So trying to find out what exactly that strategy is going to be a goal of a lot of these reporters. So we'll see where it goes. Sure. James Freeman, thanks for being here this morning. Good to see you.
You too. All right. Thanks, Sandra. Well, there's a dramatic scene caught on camera in New York City's Times Square.
Get that car! Get the car!
A police officer, well, he was nearly run down when he tries to stop a car. Look at that. What we're learning now about that driver.
Plus, a morning commute turns chaotic for passengers in one big city after a train derails. The latest on this story.
And a stall in the immigration talks as the fate of hundreds of thousands of young immigrants hangs in the balance. While the president says Democrats are to blame for where things stand today.
If we want a comprehensive bill, I'm all in. But we can't do a comprehensive bill which will take months and months to negotiate before the March 5th deadline.
There's a Fox News alert on a subway derailment on the Metro in Washington, D.C. Officials say that train derailed early this morning inside a tunnel in downtown Washington. 60 passengers were on board. They were stranded for more than an hour, but thankfully they were all safely evacuated, we're told. Right now, there's no word on the exact cause of the incident, but the Metro has been plagued by several derailments and collisions in recent years. Stay tuned to Fox News Channel as we learn more about that this morning. Sandra?
An immigration deal hanging in the balance as we speak, as President Trump and lawmakers struggle to make headway in those negotiations. Some Democrats have threatened to vote against the legislation, which expires on Friday, unless a clean deal is given to those so-called dreamers.
what Democrats have been saying is that we need to have a deal on DACA because President Trump, by trying to repeal DACA, has created this chaos. I will tell my Democratic friends the following. DACA is now actually alive, and the Homeland Security Department is now accepting renewal applications. So it's nowhere near dead.
Let's bring in North Carolina Congressman Mark Walker. He is the chair of the House Republican Study Committee. Congressman, thank you for joining us this morning. Perhaps you can give us an update as we start off what could be another wild week. Give us an update on where things stand right now.
Well, as I think many of us are here in our district celebrating the different and various Martin Luther King Jr. events throughout our districts. But tomorrow morning, we will pick this fight back up. It is important. Republicans, as we all know, control both the House and the Senate. It's upon us to get something resolved. We think we're close, but every time we feel like we get close, it seems like Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer continue to move that line, even threatening this week. And we feel like they're going to trend more this direction, even threatening a potential government shutdown.
So, Congressman, who do you blame for holding things up right now?
I certainly blame the Democrats. Obviously, we want to continue to make sure that our tone and our language is certainly appropriate. Yet the truth is simply the truth. It was Chuck Schumer who just said recently, a few years ago, I should say, that shutting down the government over even immigration reform would be ludicrous. Nancy Pelosi called it legislative arsonists. Yet we see them using this as a ploy and a pawn. And I hate to be finger pointing so early this morning on a Monday morning, but the point is that Republicans have continued to move, even offering a legalized pathway, if you will, that as long as it proposes full border security, reduces the chain migration, and also the visa lottery program. We even saw back in November a terrorist came through under this particular program. I believe most Americans want to make sure that we're protecting. It's the first oath that members of the United States Congress take, and I hope that's something that's serious to all of us.
Congressman, what has changed since early last week? It looked so optimistic and even positive when the president sat down at that meeting in the White House. Was congressmen and women, senators were present. It was Democrats, it was Republicans. Everybody seemed to come together, and it looked for a brief minute like a bipartisan agreement was possible. And here we start off this week, and the Democrats are adamant. It's got to be a clean deal on DACA. And Republicans say it's got to be the border wall, funding for the border wall. So who's going to eventually give here? Why are things so much different than they were a week ago?
Well, let's just go back to the Democrats' position over the last few elections. We'd like for them just to go back to that position where they were okay with continuing or completing the border wall, completing the Fence Act, also offering more security agents, as well as more surveillance. The Democrats are the one that continue, as they say up here and other places, they continue to move the goalposts. We were willing to come to the table. We've negotiated, we've compromised on several of these issues that are important to the American people, yet it seems like the Democrats say either it's our way or the highway, and it's our complete way. That's a problem in any aspect of life, much more politics here in Washington, D.C.
I want to throw up the president's most recent tweet on DACA. It happens to be his most recent tweet this morning, saying DACA is probably dead because the Democrats don't really want it. They just want to talk and take desperately needed money away from our military, the president tweeted. The president said he was open to signing anything that came across his desk. So did the president change his tune as well on this?
He might be part of the negotiation process, but I don't think he's changed very much. In fact, he's completely spot on when it comes to our military and defense. Think about this statistic. Over half of the Navy planes and jets do not fly because of deferred maintenance. That means we haven't been keeping them updated because of the cost. We've put it in other different programs. I've stood in the empty silos in Alaska where missiles should be to be able to thwart any kind of intercontinental ballistic missiles that may be coming our direction. We have depleted and gutted the military and reinvested those taxpayers' dollars other places. So if the Democrats are willing to shut down the government when we're at a very crucial time dealing with things with Iran, with North Korea, I think it would be a very fatal mistake for the Democrats to use such posturing.
Congressman, I have to leave it there, but put on your forecasting hat for me. How does this weekend?
Well, if the Democrats will move at all, I believe we can reach an agreement. If they want to use this as a political pawn and try to keep the DACA recipients as bait for the rest of the year into the November elections, they may choose to hold that posture, but it only hurts the DACA recipients and hopefully the Democrats eventually in the elections.
Congressman, thanks for coming on this morning. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Oh, they were out for some fun, and it ended tragically in a deadly fire on the water. Desperate passengers jumping overboard when a crowded offshore casino boat goes up in flames.
Plus, President Trump's former campaign manager, Corey Lewandowski, says he is ready to answer any and all Russia questions as he heads to the Capitol this week.
Well, meanwhile, in Washington, two of President Trump's key former campaign advisors are expected to appear this week on Capitol Hill. Corey Lewandowski has agreed to testify before the House Intelligence Committee, and Steve Bannon may also, all part, of course, of the ongoing Russia investigation. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge live now in Washington with a preview. Hi, Catherine.
Well, thanks, Eric. Speaking to WABC Radio, the former Trump campaign manager said he would testify voluntarily this week to the House Intelligence Committee behind closed doors. Lewandowski, who we expect on the Hill midweek, said he's not concerned because he has no ties to the Kremlin.
I have nothing to hide. I didn't collude or cooperate or coordinate with any Russian agency, Russian government, or anybody else to try and impact this election. I'll be happy to come out and set the record straight about my lack of involvement with any type of foreign entity.
Also scheduled for this week, Steve Bannon, the president's former chief strategist. In this session, the focus will be on Bannon's time as Trump's campaign chief and not his time at the White House. Bannon is expected tomorrow behind closed doors. And for some context, the House Intelligence Committee routinely conducts their interviews in private because the testimony often touches on classified issues. The final 2 weeks of January are shaping up to be on a fast track for that committee, trying to arrange the testimony from senior FBI officials, most were part of former Director Comey's inner circle. They include the demoted FBI agent Peter Strzok, who sent anti-Trump text messages to FBI lawyer Lisa Page, who he was having an extramarital affair with. Page and was also reassigned. Former FBI General Counsel James Baker is also expected to testify. The one to watch may be David Kramer. The committee's Republican leadership has issued a subpoena for Kramer. He works for Senator John McCain, and as Fox first reported in December, British court records state Senator McCain ordered Kramer to get a personal briefing from the British spy who compiled the dossier and then returned to Washington, D.C., where the opposition research firm Fusion GPS would provide McCain with hard copies of the dossier. A source familiar with the matter told Fox that the evidence strongly suggests Kramer has information about the British spy's sources for the dossier and may even have an understanding as to the extent to which the FBI relied on the dossier. Kramer has passed on multiple requests for comment from Fox News, Eric.
All right, Catherine, that Kramer angle, quite intriguing.
Yeah, very
Thank
interesting,
you.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. Sandra?
Thanks.
A terrifying moment at one country's stock exchange after the floor collapses out of nowhere. The details on how this happened straight ahead.
Plus, a top Republican senator saying he is hopeful now that the GOP will keep their majority in 2018 at the election in November. Well, we'll take a look at some of the most critical races and look at the midterm math coming up.
Plus, the legal sale of pot is generating a lot of dough for the government. We explain why some governors don't want to give up the controversial business. Is live in London with more on this story, this boggling story, and many people hurt, Benjamin.
Many people hurt, but no one dead, very fortunately. We still don't know what caused it, but we're speaking to people out there and they say it could have been a lot worse. As you mentioned, it happened at lunchtime, and so many people had fortunately left the building at the time that this mezzanine just collapsed. It gave way as a group of around 30 students were walking across it. 75 were hurt in total as whole slabs of concrete crashed down around them, trapping some of the injured, and the room filled with dust, causing immediate panic. Police cordoned off the complex as people fled. The more seriously injured were taken away to be treated at 4 local hospitals. Today, police ruled out a bomb as a cause of the incident, and they were keen to reiterate this point. Muslims there, and they have been hit by a number of terror attacks over the last few years. And so today, in particular, they were keen to show that this was nothing else but a tragic accident. Sandra?
Indeed. Benjamin Hall, thank you.
People are fired up, and that's good. People are engaged in politics. There's people engaged in levels they've never been engaged before. People on both sides of the aisle who supported President Trump had never been involved in politics before. People who may be on the left side of the political spectrum who are engaged in activities they've never been engaged before. That's good.
Oh, that's Colorado Republican Senator Cory Gardner saying he's hopeful Republicans will be victorious in the midterms. But right now, Republicans are holding on to a very slim majority in the Senate. So what's going to happen? Let's bring in our political panel, Katie Pavlich, editor at townhall.com and a Fox News contributor, Emily Tish Sussman, campaign director for the Center for American Progress Action Fund and a Democratic strategist. Welcome to you both.
Good morning.
Good morning. Emily, let me start with you. What do you predict?
I do predict there to be very high Democratic turnout and that Democrats will pick up a lot of seats both at a federal level. I actually think the House is probably more likely to flip than the Senate, but there's going to be a lot of Democratic pickup in both houses and state level. I think there's a ton of governor's races that are up right now, and state legislatures may swing as well. What we're seeing all over the country is that people see that there is full Republican control at many state levels and totally at a federal level, and the Republicans cannot govern, and they are not finding a backbone to stand up to Trump.
Well,
so when Trump dominates the news every day.
Yeah, but you just heard Cory Gardner say that the base is energized, Emily.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure what he's talking about. Maybe he's talking about Trump's base, which is why Trump's numbers never break above about 34%, which is his hardcore base. Republicans are really in a bind right now. They know they can't abandon that base that still supports Trump, but they are totally losing the middle. They're totally losing independents who are willing to give Trump a chance. You see it all over in every election we've seen, particularly in the suburbs.
All right, Katie, are Republicans in a bind?
Well, look, after the decimation of the Democratic Party due to Barack Obama's ideology, meaning 1,000 seats across the country, local, state, and federal, Democrats only have up to go. The bar is pretty low for them. But in terms of what Republicans are going to have to do, yes, they need to be worried. They are going to have to work very hard on getting their voters to turn out. There are a number of Republicans who aren't running for re-election, many of them in districts that Hillary Clinton won in 2016 against President Donald Trump. But if Republicans can stay on message, talk about their economic agenda, remind people that it was Democrats who voted against them getting their $1,000, $2,000 bonuses and their increase in wages this year because they all voted against the tax reform bill, I think that they'll be okay.
Yeah, Katie, what about that? I mean, the fact is the tax reform bill and the economy will certainly be front and center. So you think that the president and the Republicans will be waving, those fake, phony kind of checks to remind people that they are getting those bonuses, Katie?
Yeah, I mean, I think the president has to remain disciplined and focused, specifically when it comes to his rhetoric and what he wants Republicans to be asked about. Republicans don't want to be asked about his commentary on certain issues. They want to be asked about the economy and what Republicans are doing for them. But the good news is that come February, people are going to see in their paychecks a direct result of the tax reform bill. We've seen electric companies across the country lower their rates. We've seen the minimum wage be increased in companies that the left is demanding the government force them to increase those wages for years, and they just did it voluntarily because there's less government involvement. And we're also seeing businesses across the country hiring more because of the deregulation going on. So Republicans should stay focused on that message and take Bill Clinton's advice.
Yeah, I'm glad we're talking about the tax bill because not only it's true there have been a minimal number of increases from companies, but actually what we're seeing overall is we're seeing companies cuts. We're seeing companies cut jobs. Just last week we saw Sam's Club closing 63 locations. That's going to result in 11,000 layoffs in places where there are no other job opportunities.
That is true, Emily, but at the same time, Walmart, they're giving out the checks and hiring more people. I'm sorry, Katie.
Absolutely, I commend them, but I think that people probably want jobs more than they want a one-time infusion. The people that are happy are the Republican donors. Look, that came from elected Republicans in Congress saying, if we don't pass this tax bill, our donors won't come for us.
Right,
so
Katie,
I think we really know who's
happy. Wait a minute, Emily. Katie, what did you say? You had some figures?
I just find this elitist ideology and message that only 136 companies have handed out $1,000 bonuses to hundreds of employees is a bad thing that people aren't going to like, especially coming from the left, which is the side of the political aisle that claims to stand for the middle class. Companies like Walmart have been pressured for years through protests by liberal leftist groups to raise their minimum wage. And here we are with less government intervention, allowing companies to bring more of their money home, to keep more of their money, and they're giving it directly to employees. And all Democrats can do, like Nancy Pelosi, is ask
about the 11,000 people that just got laid off by the same company.
All right, let Emily answer. Go ahead, Emily.
Look, but what about those 11,000 people from the exact same company that just lost their jobs? This is clearly smoke and mirrors to get people talking about the fact that there are some increases coming in, and we're thrilled that that is happening. But the fact that people are now losing jobs in areas that are not going to come back, what about that? Republicans only take credit for one piece of the economy. What about the one company that Trump intervened in, Carrier, who said they wouldn't send the jobs? He took credit for the fact of them saying they wouldn't send jobs to Mexico. And guess what? Last week they did. After the tax bill passed.
Well, they
you
still
want to take credit, you got to take credit for every piece.
1,100 jobs in that Indianapolis factory.
They do, and it is the third time they've sent jobs overseas since this administration has begun.
And that was before the corporate tax rate was lowered. That was before 22 regulations for everyone, new one put on the books. That was before, when they were looking at all of the regulations on the books. This happened 9 months ago when they made this decision. The final pieces of this were implemented last week. So as we go forward, deregulation has allowed the economy to flourish and grow. GDP is up. More people are employed. People are looking for work and finding it. That is a far cry from the 8 years that we saw under Barack Obama.
We're up against the clock, and that is the debate we're going to be hearing about all through the next year. Katie and Emily, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Some shocking video for you this morning. A New York City police officer nearly run down by a luxury car as the driver speeds away in Times Square.
It just happened down on the corner from where we are. And there's some stunning new developments in the Las Vegas shooting massacre in October. Well, we're now learning about the suspect's girlfriend as we continue to try and learn the motive behind that horrible attack that killed 58 people.
And panic in Hawaii as a false alert goes out warning of an incoming ballistic missile. How can this happen? And what's being done to prevent a repeat? Retired four-star General Jack Keane is on deck to discuss.
I apologize for this. This is my responsibility and my team. But please keep in mind that, again, the threat is there. If this comes out, you're going to have only about 12 to 13 minutes of warning for an actual event, and please take this to heart. It's a human error. There is a screen that says, are you sure you want to do this? Okay, again, that's already in place. Now, we had one person, human error, and that thing was pushed anyway.
This false alarm is a terrible thing to happen, and we have implemented changes already to assure that it doesn't happen again. We will further refine the processes as we go forward.
Retired four-star General Jack Keane, chairman of the Institute for the Study of War and Fox News senior strategic analyst, joins us now. And I think, General, I'll start by asking the question so many have this morning, and how can this happen?
Yeah, well, certainly it's frustrating. In the Hawaii Emergency Management System, in their computers, from what I understand, at the shift change, one of the things that was downloaded to the new operator coming on was the choice to make between test missile alert or missile alert. And regrettably, he selected, or she, missile alert. And that broadcast out over their emergency management system. And then also in their system, they're writing actually a federal communications backbone that FEMA has put out. And to correct it, they had no immediate correction. And that's why, as you suggested in the introduction, it took 38 minutes. So that's as bad as a mistake as the first one. These are easily rectifiable, and I'm sure they must have them fixed by now.
Well, they have, and now it'll take two people to authorize that alert to go out. Perhaps a third button, if you will, to send a cancellation notice, because 38 minutes was a long time, and as we can all imagine, created a lot of chaos there in Hawaii. But U.S. authorities, we are told, were alerted immediately to this, including the president, General Keane. What would have been the order of events? The U.S. would have obviously knowledge of this before an alert would have gone out in Hawaii.
Well, if we actually had a missile launch, first of all, any missile launch in the world, at the moment of the launch, the United States is aware of it. We're the only country in the world that has the number of satellites and sensors to detect any missile launch in the world, and certainly we have a special focus on North Korea. So what the United States military are doing, when you have a launch and they begin, second thing they're doing is they know they have a launch, and now they're tracking it to determine where that is going. Is that track lead to one of our allies? Does it lead to the United States? And while they're doing that, And once they're able to identify the track, then they'll notify the appropriate geographic command. In this case, it would be Pacific Command. And they, in turn, would notify the emergency action of the local governments within their command to take final action in terms of notifying the people. The last thing the United States military has got responsibility for, not only to identify that there's a launch, not only to track that launch, but also to intercept that launch, either using sea-based missile interceptors or land-based missile interceptors.
In the hours that followed all of this Saturday morning, this happening, the governor came out and apologized for this mistake having happened. That being said, he also called on the president in the United States to continue to de-escalate the growing threat coming from North Korea. Are we doing that, General?
Well, we're trying to. Let's put it that way. I mean, Director Pompeo, 2 weeks ago on Fox, on a Sunday show, on Chris Wallace's show, said that we're just months away from North Korea having a full objective capability. That means nuclearized ICBMs. What that tells me, in language I understand, is we have a showdown coming likely by the summer, which means we have to be in full court press here with all of our economic and diplomatic actions, and we cannot wait for China's tardiness. We've got to get them into full court press mode. And I also think, Sandra, there's some things we can do from a military perspective that we may or may not be doing. I think we should be hitting North Korea with offensive cyber right now in terms of hitting their information systems, their command and control systems. I don't know why we're still sending families to South Korea on accompanied tours. I think we should have stopped that when the president said the military option is back on the table. It doesn't make any sense to me, and I think we should make some plans to get those families out of there eventually and to get the several 100,000 Americans out of there eventually.
All right, General, always good to get your perspective. Thanks for coming on this morning.
Good talking to you, Sandra.
And Happening Now is up in about 10 minutes from now. John Scott is, of course, there. John, what do you got cooking?
Good morning, Eric. With a deal to protect the so-called Dreamers from being deported nowhere in sight, President Trump blames Democrats for not reaching an agreement. We'll get into that. Plus, police say a passenger on a Greyhound bus threatens to kill other riders, sparking a chase from Wisconsin to Illinois. The suspect, an illegal immigrant who had already been deported 5 times. And a driver admitted using narcotics after crashing his car into a dental office on the 2nd floor of a California building. That video, top of the hour.
All right, John, see you in about 10 minutes.
All right, thanks.
Well, meanwhile, governors of states that have legalized their recreational sale of marijuana, well, they're vowing to fight the DOJ's attempt to take legal action against them. But the reason, well, it comes down to one thing.